AITA for leaving my GF after discovering she's cheating with her close friend. My name is Sam. I'm 28 years old, and I was born and raised in a small town on the outskirts of Texas. My parents were hard-working people. My dad was a mechanic, and my mom took care of the house, and us her 4 children. Of the 4, I was always the most restless, the one who always had his head somewhere else, while my siblings followed in my father's footsteps. I dreamed of seeing beyond the borders of our small town. I liked to get lost in my thoughts while listening to music or reading an adventure book. I always knew there was something more for me outside of that place. From a young age, I developed a passion for music. I learned to play the guitar when I was 12, thanks to a neighbor who taught me the basic chords. From that moment on, music became my escape, my way of expressing what I couldn't put into words. My friends and I used to play in the town square on weekends. Sometimes we earned some money, but more than anything, we did it for the love of music. Although I always had a deep connection with my roots, I felt that my true place was somewhere else, somewhere where I could find myself and maybe, if I was lucky, make a career in music. When I finished high school, I knew I didn't want to stay in Texas. I enrolled in a university in New York to study music, a giant step for someone who had never been outside of their home state. It was an overwhelming change, but necessary. At university, I met many people with the same interests as me, which made me feel like I had finally found my place. The city was chaos, but a chaos. I loved the concerts, the endless nights in bars and the jam sessions with other musicians made me feel alive. Not everything was easy, of course. I lived in a small apartment with 2 other guys. We barely had enough money to pay the rent, and I survived on pizza and coffee. But those were the happiest days of my life. I dedicated myself to music and strived to improve every day. I played in bars and in subway stations, any place where I could make my guitar sound. It was during one of those jam sessions in a bar that I met Nicole. At first, I didn't think she would be so important in my life, but that changed quickly. Nicole was unlike any girl I had met before. She was 26 and worked as a graphic designer at an advertising agency. We met at a bar after I finished playing one night. She came up to me and said she had really enjoyed my music, and we ended up talking for hours. She was intelligent, charming, and had an energy that captivated me from the first moment. She told me about her life in the city, her ambitions and dreams. We laughed, talked about our favorite bands, and about how life in the big city could sometimes be overwhelming. At that time, I was in a good place in my life. I felt like everything was starting to fall into place. Nicole and I started seeing each other more often, and soon we became inseparable. What I liked most about her was her passion for what she did. She always had new and creative ideas for her projects, and that inspired me. We shared many interests, but at the same time, we were different in several aspects, which made our relationship exciting. I fell in love with her quickly, and although there was a small voice in my head telling me to be careful, I ignored it completely. After a few months, we decided to move in together. We found a small apartment in Brooklyn that we could afford between the 2 of us. Life with Nicole at first was fantastic. We lived each day as an adventure. We went out to explore the city, tried new restaurants, or stayed home watching series or listening to music. I loved spending time with her. She had a knack for making the simplest things special. Nicole was my muse, and many of the songs I wrote at that time were inspired by her. However, over time, some cracks began to appear. I started to notice that Nicole was becoming increasingly distant. Sometimes she stayed at work or went out with her friends without telling me. At first, I didn't pay much attention to it. I thought maybe it was just the stress of work or that she needed her space. But over time, these absences became more frequent and prolonged. I was worried, but I didn't want to be the controlling boyfriend who asked for explanations for everything. However, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. One day, when I was alone in the apartment, I decided to check Nicole's phone. It wasn't something I felt comfortable doing, but curiosity was killing me. I had noticed that lately she was more secretive with her phone, and that made me suspicious. What I found left me frozen. There were messages from a number I didn't recognize, flirty messages and some quite intimate. My heart stopped for a moment. I couldn't believe what I was reading, but there it was, in black and white, the evidence that Nicole was cheating on me. At first, I didn't know what to do. My mind was a mess. I felt betrayed, humiliated, but above all lost. Nicole and I had built a life together, and now all of that felt like a lie. I decided that I wouldn't confront Nicole immediately. I wanted to be sure of what was happening before making any decisions. So I pretended that everything was fine, acted as if I didn't know anything, but inside I was devastated. Over time, I kept finding more evidence of the deception. It was obvious that Nicole was having an affair with someone else, and that was consuming me. I started watching her more closely, paying attention to every little detail. I noticed how she dressed up more when she went out with friends, and how she always had an excuse ready when she was late. Everything pointed to there being another man in her life, but I couldn't bear the thought of losing her. Still, I wasn't willing to be the fool who stood idly by while she cheated on me. One night, after Nicole went asleep, I decided to investigate further. I checked her messages again and found a conversation that confirmed everything. She was talking to a co-worker, someone I had never heard of before. They were arranging to see each other after work, and from the way they wrote, it was clear that it wasn't the first time. My heart broke into 1,000 pieces at that moment, but I also felt a rage I had never experienced before. I couldn't believe Nicole was doing this to me after everything we had been through together. After discovering the truth, I knew I couldn't continue living in that lie. The idea of confronting Nicole kept going through my head, but every time I thought about it, I felt more and more frustrated. I didn't want to make a scene. I didn't want to argue. I just wanted to get out of that situation as quickly as possible. So instead of facing her, I decided to leave. I knew the apartment was mine, but I didn't care at that moment. All I wanted was to get away from her and everything that reminded me of our relationship. One night, while N.I. Cool was on one of her outings with friends, I packed all my things. I took the essentials and left the rest behind. I didn't leave a note. I didn't send a message. I simply disappeared. I wanted her to come home and realize that I was no longer there, that her betrayal had consequences. As I left the apartment for the last time, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. I knew I was doing the right thing, but that didn't make it hurt any less. After leaving, I moved to the other side of the city. I found a small apartment in Queens, nothing luxurious, but comfortable enough to start over. It was difficult at first. I felt alone and lost, but I knew it was best for me. I had to leave Nicole in everything she represented behind. I dedicated myself to working on my music, trying to occupy my mind with anything other than Nicole's betrayal. I spent hours on my guitar, writing songs that reflected my pain, my anger, but also my determination to move on. Soon, I began to explore the city again, to rediscover it as I had done when I first arrived. I met new people, some of whom became good friends, and little by little, I began to feel like myself again. I had no contact with Nicole. I didn't know if she had tried to look for me, or if she had simply moved on with her life. To be honest, I didn't care. I was focused on my future, on building a new life away from her. In the midst of my rebuilding process, I met Dan. He was a little older than me, about 35, but with a carefree attitude and a constant smile on his face. We met at a coffee shop where he used to work on his computer, always writing something that seemed important. One day, after seeing him several times, I decided to talk to him. It turned out that he owned a small recording studio and was always looking for new talent. I told him about my passion for music, and he offered me a job almost immediately. Dan was like a lifeline for me at that time. He not only gave me a job that I was passionate about, but he also helped me regain my self-confidence. We started working together on some musical projects, and little by little, I began to feel that my life was getting back on track. Dan was a good friend, someone who truly understood me and supported my dreams. Thanks to him, I began to see a brighter future, one in which Nicole no longer had a place. While working in the studio, I began to meet new people, and among them some girls who were interested in me. I wasn't looking for anything serious at that time. I was still processing what had happened with Nicole, but I couldn't deny that I enjoyed female company. One of the girls I met was Anna, a singer with an incredible voice and a personality that lit up any room. She was a self-assured, funny woman who was passionate about music. We got along very well, and although I wasn't looking for a relationship, our connection was undeniable. Another girl I met was Laura, a photographer who worked in the same building as the studio. Laura was quieter, more reserved, but with a deep gaze that intrigued me. We spent a lot of time talking, sharing our life experiences and exploring the city together. With each passing day, I realized that life was giving me a second chance, a chance to be happy without the shadows of the past. I was starting to enjoy things again, to feel like I could be myself without the weight of what had happened with Nicole. After several months of being in my new life, something unexpected happened. One day, while I was in the studio with Dan, I received a message from Nicole. I hadn't seen it coming. The message was short and to the point. It simply said she needed to talk to me. My heart skipped a beat when I read it, and all the emotions I had buried began to resurface. I didn't want to go back to that dark place. I didn't want to face her, but I knew that eventually I would have to. I decided to ignore her message for a few days. I needed time to think about how to handle the situation, but Nicole didn't give up. She sent me more messages, some of them full of regret, others pleading, saying that she missed me and that she wanted to fix things. At first, I didn't know whether to answer her or not, but in the end I decided it was better to face her and close that chapter of my life once and for all. I finally agreed to meet with Nicole at a coffee shop near my new apartment. When I saw her walk in, I noticed that she looked different. She seemed more tired, as if life had taken its toll. We greeted each other with a brief hug, but the tension was palpable. We sat down and started talking, at first about trivial things, but then Nicole got straight to the point. She confessed that she had made a big mistake, that she couldn't stop thinking about what we had, and how she had ruined everything. Her eyes filled with tears as she spoke, and for a moment I felt a pang of compassion, but I also felt anger. I remembered all the pain she had caused me, how she had betrayed me, and then pretended that everything was fine. I couldn't just forget all that, because now she felt bad. I let her talk. I let her get everything out that she had inside, but when it was my turn to respond, I didn't hold back. I told her exactly how I had felt, how she had destroyed the trust we had, and how there was no going back for us. My words made her cry, but I didn't care. I needed her to know that I wouldn't forgive her, that there would be no second chance. After our meeting, Nicole tried to contact me again several times, but I never responded. I had said everything I had to say, and I saw no reason to stay in touch with her. But as the days went by, I realized that I wasn't done with her influence on my life. I learned from mutual friends that she had lost her job and that she couldn't afford the rent on the apartment where we lived. The situation had become unsustainable for her, and that only reaffirmed that I had made the right decision to leave. Nicole was alone, without the support of the friends we once shared, and without a place to live. For a moment, I felt a glimmer of pity for her, but then I remembered everything that had happened. Nicole was paying the price for her decisions, and although I wasn't glad about her suffering, I didn't feel the need to intervene either. I had my own life now, and I wasn't going to let her drag me back into her chaos with Nicole out of my life. I focused completely on my music and my work with Dan. I had found a stability that I hadn't felt in a long time, and I was determined not to let anything or anyone take it away from me. My days were filled with rehearsals, recordings, and collaborations with other musicians. Every day was a new opportunity to create something new, to improve and grow as an artist. In addition, the new people in my life like Anna and Laura had given me a fresh perspective on relationships. I wasn't looking for anything serious, but I enjoyed their company. The deep conversations with Laura and the jam sessions with Anna. They helped me see that there was more to life than clinging to the past, that it was possible to me to move on and find happiness in simple things. As time went on, I realized that it was okay to be alone. I had spent so much time trying to make my relationship with Nicole work that I had forgotten what it was like to just be me. Now, with that burden off my shoulders, I was rediscovering who I was and what I really wanted out of life. My music became more authentic, more reflective of what I felt inside. I began to write songs that spoke of liberation, of personal growth, and of how sometimes the things that hurt us most are the ones that teach us the most. Dan noticed this change in my music and encouraged me to continue exploring those themes. Thanks to him, I started working on my first solo album, something I had always dreamed of doing but had never had the courage to try. Shortly after starting work on my album, I received an unexpected message. Nicole had found where I lived and had left a note on my door. In the note, she asked me for one last chance to talk, to explain herself and try to make amends. At first, I didn't know whether to accept it or not, but after thinking about it for a couple of days, I decided to give her one last chance. I knew I wouldn't go back to her, but maybe this time I could get some closure. We met at the same coffee shop where we had seen each other the last time. Nicole looked even worse than before, as if she had aged years in just a few months. She apologized again. She told me that she had been in therapy and that she had begun to understand why she had done what she did. She told me that she had cut off all contact with the guy she cheated on me with and that she was trying to rebuild her life, but that she kept thinking about me and what we had lost. After listening to her, I realized that although her words were sincere, there was nothing I could do to change what had happened. I told her that I was glad she was trying to improve her life, but that for me, our relationship was over. I didn't hold a grudge, but I couldn't forgive her either. We were no longer the same people we had been when we met, and our paths had taken different directions. Nicole cried again, and although a part of me felt bad for her, I knew I was making the right decision. I hugged her one last time and wished her the best. As she walked away, I felt a peace I hadn't felt in a long time. I had finally closed that chapter of my life, and now I could fully focus on my future. With Nicole definitively out of my life, I threw myself fully into music. My album was taking shape, and each song was a piece of my journey, a representation of what I had lived and learned. Dan and I spent hours in the studio experimenting with different sounds and arrangements. I was creating something I was truly proud of, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control of my life. Meanwhile, my relationship with Anna and Laura remained significant. With Anna, I shared a musical connection that fueled my creativity. With Laura, the long walks around the city and our deep conversations helped me maintain my emotional balance. I wasn't looking for anything serious, but I enjoyed the company of both of them, and I appreciated the way they helped me move forward. After months of hard work, the day of my album release finally arrived. Dan and I organized a small event at the studio to celebrate it, inviting friends and colleagues from the music world. It was an incredible night, full of good music, laughter, and the satisfaction of seeing how all the effort had paid off. The album was well received, and although it didn't become an overnight success, it was the beginning of something big for me. A few months after the release of my album, I ran into Nicole by chance in the city. I was in a bookstore looking at some vinyl records when I saw her come in. My first instinct was to get out of there before she saw me, but it was too late. Our eyes met, and I had no choice but to greet her. She looked better than the last time I saw her, more serene, as if she had finally found some peace. We greeted each other cordially and started talking about what we had been doing. Nicole told me that she had found a new job and that she was starting to date someone new. I was surprised at how well I took it. I no longer felt any bitterness or resentment. I told her about my album and how I had been working on new projects. The conversation was brief but friendly, and when we said goodbye, I realized that she no longer had any power over me. Over time, I began to feel ready for a new relationship. I had met many interesting people during my travels and performances, and one of them was Sarah, a folk singer who had a voice that captivated me from the first moment. Sarah and I started dating, and although I was cautious at first, I soon realized that she was unlike anyone else I had met. Sarah was honest, straightforward, and shared my love for music. We had a connection that went beyond the superficial, and I felt truly happy when I was with her. For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to let my guard down and open my heart again. Sarah taught me to love in a healthier way, without the burden of the past, and without fear of the future. I was learning to be happy again, this time in a way that felt real and sustainable. Together, we began to plan our future, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had everything I had always wanted. My second album was an even bigger success than the first, and it began to receive recognition not only locally, but also nationally. My music was reaching people across the country, and the opportunities kept coming. I started receiving invitations to play at major festivals, and my schedule was fuller than ever. Despite the success, I made sure to keep my feet on the ground. Sarah and I shared my passion for authentic music. Sarah was a big influence on my music, and many of the songs on the second album were inspired by our relationship and what we had built together. Over time, Sarah and I decided to formalize our relationship. There was no big wedding or extravagant ceremony, just a small gathering with our closest friends and family. It was a simple day, but perfect. And in the end, we felt incredibly happy to have found each other and built something so special together. Sarah and I continued working on music together, and our collaboration became one of the highlights of my career. We toured together, wrote songs together, and every day I felt more grateful to have her in my life. We had found a way to balance our careers and our relationship, and there was nothing more I could ask for. Sarah and I continue to make music, exploring new ideas and growing together. Sometimes I think about how everything could have been different if I hadn't had the courage to leave Nicole. But then I remember that every experience, good or bad, led me to where I am today. I am grateful for everything, even the most difficult moments, because in the end they taught me to be the person I am now. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the next story.